second annual forum. Last year, the forum went very well. All the candidates were very polite to each other, so I expect the same tonight. I want to thank the candidates for coming, and I appreciate your willingness to share your time with the community. We will post on our website, like I said, at wethepeoplelaketravis.com for anybody who's not able to be here. It is in my intention to allow all the candidates to speak at approximately take as much time as each other. So I'm hoping that no one, tries to upset here. We'll have a timer here up at the front and limit everybody's time to respond to the we'll go for about 40 minutes, and after 40 minutes, we'll take questions from the audience. Normally, I would have had you write them down if there were more people here, but I think we can just raise our hands if the group. If I ask you a question and your response is shorter than the time allowed, feel free to take up the rest of the time with responding to something else you want to tell the voters. Okay? I shared most of the initial questions with candidates beforehand so they can be prepared. Listen to all the questions. I'll be asking different questions of the candidates, so hopefully we don't get duplicative responses. If any of you have further questions after this forum, I encourage you to seek out the candidates individually and speak to them one-on-one. The two incumbents, you can reach them on the City of Lakeway website. They have email addresses. The other 4 candidates have websites where you can contact them. So I encourage you to do that. So the intention of tonight is to provide information to the community so that each voter can be an informed voter. My goal in this community at large is to turn out more informed voters. Whatever the election, whoever the candidates are, whatever the issues are, I want voters to be more informed and then come to the ballot box and cast their vote, because I think that provides a better representation of the community in whole. So, we will end before 9, no later than 9. If we run out of questions and we run out of time harassing these wonderful people, then we'll leave early, but it won't be later than 9. If for some reason that you have to leave before we end, thank you for coming. And I hope you share this event with your neighbors and your friends and also future forums that I discussed earlier. Okay, let's get started. All right. I put these in random order at home, so that's how I'm going to do this. Kelly, do you want, okay, well, we'll do it this way. Oh, First, each of you has 3 minutes to introduce yourselves, and be sure to include how you have been involved in the community before you decided to run. So we'll start with Kelly. Each of you has 3 minutes.
Do we have a microphone or no?
Nope, you are mic'd.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Kelly Brentison. My husband and I have lived in Lakeway 15 years. We're pretty proud to live here. He actually lived here back in the mid-90s and always wanted to return to this area. When we set out here to look for a home, we looked in various areas, and as we were driving down 620, I looked out, by which is now the Grove, and it just looked beautiful. And to me, I felt like I was home. And so before I even bought my house, we knew that, or even looked at it, I knew I was moving here. We just love it. Since then, we got married in Lakeway. We had our 2 babies in Lakeway. My youngest is 5 and my oldest is 7. She's at Lakeway Elementary. So when I'm not chasing after those 2 little rambunctious sweethearts, I work in competitive intelligence. And competitive intelligence is a very strategic, analytical, innovative career. It takes a very specific mindset to be successful in this. You have to be both creative and analytical. In the community, or actually I want to do my 3 first. So the first one I want to work on if I'm elected is transportation and road safety. I'm going to get into that because that's a specific question, our number 1. My second one is intelligent development. I approach every issue with intelligence just because that is the way in my training and my mind works. I think it's extremely important with that Lakeway is almost built out. There's very few parcels that are still remaining to be developed. With that said, any redevelopment, any new developments, and any rezoning has to be decided upon very, very strategically, not willy-nilly. We don't have the space for it. It has to make sure that it works for all of Lakeway, and it also has to make sure that it doesn't impact adjacent neighbors or create road hazards. That's my number one thing. In the community, I am been very entrenched in charities since I moved here 15 years ago. I work with Mac, Jack, and McConaughey, the Rice School of Austin, Center for Child Protection, which actually has a satellite office here in Lomans. Locally, too, I work with CC4C, 1231, and then Lakeway Elementary, we have a PTO that I donate to. So a lot of just deep charity work. I'm very big on giving back, and I've raised over $130,000 with the donation of my art. It's my passion in giving back, is that part of that. Why you should vote for me is, A, I have the experience and I have the dedication to the city. We moved here, this is our forever home. I have a very vested interest in making this city successful. I've been to every single city council meeting and in person for over a year since it went back in person. I know what the issues the city is facing, the history behind them, and who the key stakeholders are. So why is that important? Because with the issues that the city is facing right now, we need somebody who's ready to go day one, and that's me.
Thank you, Kelly. Connie, you want to go next?
I'm sorry.
Turn that off.
Are we doing our top three or just introducing ourselves?
3 minutes, any way you want to use that.
Okay.
Make sure you include how you've been involved in the community prior to filing.
Sure.
That's all. Yep.
Hi, my name is Connie Ditto, and I am running for city council because I am a mother, a wife, a business owner, the wife of a business owner, former ICU RN at Parkland Hospital in the trauma, ER, critical care units. And I've been practicing law for 15 years in civil litigation. I have represented plaintiffs and defendants. I have done personal injury, employment law, contracts, oil and gas litigation, everything except for estates, family, and criminal matters. I also represent professionals, mostly healthcare professionals, before the boards, and I help small businesses open. That experience gives me a broad range of experiences to draw upon. I know what it's like to be on both sides of a situation, and I understand that our community is facing a lot of issues. I chose this moment in time because, as I said, my two little boys are 4 and 5. This is my window to jump in before the after-school sports and activities get crazy. My husband's a general surgeon. He's very busy. They are going to start school. My 5-year-old's going to go into kindergarten. My 4-year-old's going to be in pre-K. So I've got a few years where I do have a window and I can jump in and put the time and energy into council. I care very much about this community. My husband and I have been together for almost 20 years in June. We've moved over 13 times. He was in nursing school and I was in nursing school when we met up at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. I grew up first I was born around Detroit. My dad retired from the steel mill. And then we moved to Indiana. And I went to Purdue University, and my husband was down at UT Austin. We met up in Minnesota, moved to Dallas, worked at Parkland. I went to law school, he went to medical school, and we ended up in Lakeway just over 5 years ago. And actually, one of my neighbors is here. He may remember when we moved down here. My husband was finishing his fellowship, so I was 7 months pregnant, and my husband wasn't going to move down here for another 9 months. So I knew that my community had to be safe. I had 4 geriatric dogs at the time. David would see me waddling around. I knew it was safe. I knew it had good schools, and it's absolutely beautiful. And that's the way that I want to keep our community. Anybody that knows me knows that I love to talk. I'm very friendly. I'm interested in anything anybody has to say, and I'm very interested to know what our community wants and how we want to move forward, specifically from the pandemic, which became so divisive. So let's move forward together.
Thank you. China, you want to go next?
Nina Davis. I have lived in Lakeway for over 12 years now, and I really love this city. I've had opportunities to move away, and I just couldn't make myself do it. It's safe, it's nurturing, it's quiet, yet it's vibrant. There's so much to do. It's full of beautiful vistas and our precious wildlife. Lakeway is my chosen hometown. Years ago, I practiced law. More recently, I did mediation and dispute resolution online. I've also managed several different businesses. I understand the challenge that our businesses here in Lakeway face, especially hiring and keeping good workers. Personally, I raised a daughter in Hawaii, and I've renovated 3 homes here in Lakeway. Not sure which was tougher. Personally, yeah. That aside, though, I think it's vital that citizens keep an eye on government. It's the only way to hold our politicians accountable. That's true nationally, state, and local. In Lakeway, they make it really easy to keep an eye on what's going on because everything's online. You can see the agendas, you know when the meetings are going to happen. It's really quite simple to if you have time. Not everybody does. So I have studied and participated in Lakeway politics for several years now. I attend the meetings, council meetings, ZAPCO, lots of committee meetings, and then I post about them on social media, inform other people, and try to get some discussion going. I serve on a new wildlife committee, thanks to Mayor Kilgore. We've expanded the city's website to provide helpful info, not just on our deer. By the way, the herd is stable and healthy. It's great. No culling needed. Not just the deer, but we're also talking about the other wildlife that we have here. Huge coyotes, skunks, so we're trying to give the public information that they need to interact on a happy level with all of Lakeway's residents, human and otherwise. As a result of all these things, I know Lakeway. I understand how the city works. I know the issues and the players. So when elected, I'll hit the ground running. And like some of the other candidates who are new to governance and would have a steep learning curve. With your support, I'll work to get the best results for Lakeway. Even better, I'm going to keep this short and sweet, and I promise I'll do the same on council. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Szymanski. I am a 10-year Lakeway resident. My husband and I moved here in 2012 from Austin. We started out in Old Lakeway. We resided there for 7 years. And then in 2019, after having 2 children, they're 5 and 7, we moved to Rough Hollow, where we live now. I have a law enforcement background. I've spent 15 years in law enforcement as a public servant. Since the day I graduated college, that's what I've been doing. I started with the Texas Attorney General's office and worked in criminal investigations there for 5 years. Moved over to the Austin Police Department, where I spent 8 years as an officer and then left as a supervisor when I was offered a position with the statewide law enforcement association to work in legislative affairs there. My husband is also a police officer. He spent 25 years in law enforcement. He still remains there. He's a deputy with the Travis County Sheriff's Office. He is a captain over the Law Enforcement Bureau West Command, which covers this area. My involvement in the community began the day we moved here. We are members of the Emmaus Catholic Church. We've always supported the community by attending events with our children, whether it's parades, city park events. We stay in our bubble. We really don't leave Lakeway. It's one of our favorite things about Lakeway. I've always been interested in local government and government in general. So my interest in our city council began again pretty much right when we moved here. I've been monitoring the city council meetings, agendas, and over the last few years, I've had contact with several of our city council members and have stayed updated on issues of concern and just issues in general. The 3 priorities I'm running on are public safety, preservation, and responsible development, and supporting and lifting up small businesses in our community. A few things, if I have time, I want to mention. On those points, public safety, our crime rate is rising across Travis County. We would be naive to think that that's not going to come into our community. It already has. In fact, there was a brutal assault, aggravated kidnapping, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon that occurred behind High-Five a couple of weeks ago. That was committed by an Austin homeless individual who was here twice, not once but twice. I want to work really closely with the Lakeway Police Officers Association, and I'm endorsed by them. I have a direct line of communication with them. I know what it's like. I want to boost their morale, give them the tools they need to do their job. When it comes to development, we must navigate remaining development, as stated earlier, with extreme attention to detail and engage the community on their desires for these areas, the little bit of areas we do have left. Also making sure that commercial space remains commercial. I also want to be a voice for small businesses on the council. My time's up.
Thank you, Jennifer. Steve, you don't have to stand.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to stand up because I might fall down. But anyway, hello, I'm Steve Smith. I'm asking for your vote on May 7th to serve you in a third term on Lakeway City Council. My wife Ann and I arrived here 8 years ago, and we received a special warm welcome. And we learned that the magic of Lakeway was built on volunteerism, so we dove in. So far, I volunteered in Lakeway for these activities: Service League as a driver and handyman, Sing Along Lakeway as a performer, hard to believe, and videographer, Men's Breakfast as an MC, the Hills of Lakeway on Membership Drive as a new member ambassador, and as a bogey golfer in the Lakeway Men's Golf Association. I'm currently the liaison for the Heritage Committee. I've been a judge of the 4th of July parades, and I attended the Civilian Police Academy, and I was a member of LCPAAA until I got on council. Thought there might be a conflict of interest there. So after that experience, I had a lot of confidence in the amazing talent of Lakeway citizens. So I ventured into Lakeway Civic Corporation and Civic Foundation as a board member. Then I got on ZAPCO, and that taught me that Lakeway has precious little land remaining for parks and development. There's also a need for more control on some developers to get what they promised us in the preliminary plans. I served as the chair, of the Charter Review Committee, and that deepened my appreciation for the wisdom of our founders. The generous support I got on my first candidacy got me elected in 2018, and I ran unopposed in 2020. So I'm coming up for my third term now. My approach has been to listen, to understand your position, to learn what has been done and what can be done to deal with that concern, and then to lead council in implementing the best ordinances for everybody. I think I've been a voice of reason and a representative for all, working to preserve the best of Lakeway's traditions and events while remaining open to change that makes sense. Next, I'd like to see us restore the great friendly spirit that brought us to Lakeway. And to do that, that was so dampened by COVID isolation. What we have to do is get out from behind our masks, smile, play with our neighbors, and cheerfully volunteer to serve the city and others. Most of all, be grateful and happy that you were in Lakeway, where traditional values are important. Vote for Steve Smith. Thank you.
Phyllis?
I'm used to doing that when I speak. Post a picture. Anyway, I'm Louis Mastrangelo. I have lived in Lakeway since, well, I've lived in the area since 2011. Then I looked at Steiner Ranch and the Hills and Bee Cave and Lakeway and decided that I wanted to buy a home in Lakeway. So I did. For the first couple of years I was here, I was focused mostly on my job. I had just been transferred here. I was running a really large unit for a company called Shortel, and I didn't get much time to get involved in local politics. But then around 2016, I started paying more attention. I started reading. I started watching the meetings. Then I started going to the meetings, and I started getting involved. I started speaking up on issues and things like that. Then in 2017, Sandy Cox appointed me to ZAPCO. My biggest issue in getting involved with the city was we had some enormous projects Am I really already talked for a minute?
Absolutely.
We had some enormous projects that were that were so high density that I was extremely concerned. So that was the number one thing. I also didn't feel like there was a lot of transparency in our local government. So I vowed to do that. At the end of 2018, I got elected to city council. I've served for 3.5 years. I have been diligent as a member. I have never missed a city council meeting in those 3.5 years. I have been diligently working with the wildlife committee, but most importantly, I've been on the PUD committee, which is a committee that I lobbied for the council to start. So we could look at all the old PUDs, all the things that we were owed, and start getting them back. And on the PUD committee, we've managed to restate the Rough Hollow development agreement, and we have been chasing after Stratus. We have our hands tied a little bit from the past, but we are chasing Stratus to make sure that we get that done. And that is important to everyone, that last bit of road. People know that they can reach out to me, and I will come to their house. I will sit down with them to meet. I do that all month long. When one group was concerned that their neighborhood was going to be turned into a connector street, I didn't just send them an email back. I went out there. I met with all of the neighbors. I talked to them about it. That was one thing. That I did it for another group of neighbors. I have had 2 roundtables for our businesses where I had them all get together to tell me about what was not working, and I worked on that with them. I've had multiple meetings with citizens where they could come in, tell me their biggest concerns about our developments, things like that were coming up. But it's not the biggest things all the time. People know they can reach out to me for a street sign. I'm probably responsible for 7 or 8 street signs, 2 or 3 traffic lights getting changed, and some changes to some major streets and rails from where people crashed into them. These are the little things, but they matter to people, and I work on those, and that's important to me.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to ask each of you about a statement that you made on your website, and the 2 of you, the incumbents, are going to get a little twist on that because you don't have websites. But Nina, you're going to go first. On your website, you discussed the Stratus development and the extortion of the city. I think we agree that Main Street should be built. What do you suggest for getting that done? 2 minutes.
Well, as was mentioned, the city is rather hamstrung in that because in the previous administration, the agreement that Stratus should have signed saying, yes, we're going to build the road, they never signed it. And yet they were allowed to open HEB and all the other stores and sell it. And the other thing, they got all their money out of it, but they're not being held to a timetable. So the city can always go to court and sue them, and that might even work. But litigation is never the quick, easy, or sure way to solve anything. So that would be kind of a last resort. The city has other leverages and so forth. But to some extent, the city is going to have to agree to what Stratus wants. It's going to have to be a compromise, as most business things are. So Stratus has presented its plan, certain number of apartments, certain number of townhomes, and a park. I want that park. I really do want that park for the city, and I want it for Rolling Green because it insulates Rolling Green from the development next to it. So I want that park. I also want a trolley system. It seems like something that we could ask the developer to do. Actually, I did talk to the developer about it at an open house, and that's one thing that I suggested that he seemed to like. So maybe. The trolley would connect that section of Main Street to the Legend section of Main Street above and the HEB section below. As opposed to three humps of a camel, you would have a trolley connecting everything. I don't know. It might work. It would help our transportation issues as well. But it's going to be a question of compromise, give Strata something it wants, a little threat of litigation maybe in the background, and try to get them to go ahead and make some money off of Lakeway, give us some things that we want, some things Stratus wants, and hopefully get Main Street built.
Thank you. Okay. Jennifer, sorry. I'm a Jennifer, so I've already apologized to her several times. Sometimes I call her Jenny, sometimes I call her Jennifer, sometimes I call her Jen. So on your website, you discuss public safety. You suggest that we must continue to provide the tools our officers need to remain safe. What do you mean? Please elaborate.
Okay, so as a 15-year police officer myself, I know what it feels like to be assigned to a task, but not be given the tools that you need to complete that task. It's actually one of the reasons that I left the Austin Police Department. And we have to remember too, tools aren't always just tangible items, but I'll start with those. The tangible items under Chief Radford, we actually became the first city in the entire state to equip all of our officers with body-worn cameras, which is awesome. And that was done by the Lakeway Police Foundation. They also have donated a simulator, but I won't get into that too much, but that's a great piece of equipment and training tool. Another thing is technology. So there are numerous pieces of equipment, technology, and databases that we can get access to very easily. I worked in the Fusion Center for 4 years, and one example is LPR, so license plate recognition. We actually had one of those in the area where I live. For various reasons, it was taken down, and I'm asking that we revisit that. I want to revisit that because that is a tool that law enforcement can use to solve crimes. I've solved crimes myself using it. Our homicide detectives, robbery detectives, property crimes detectives. There's actually one currently posted in the Lake Point subdivision where the Travis County Sheriff's Office is continuously solving crimes in that area because of that piece of technology. And there's plenty of other databases out there with the same type of benefits to our public safety. There's some additional funds that the citizens of Lakeway voted on for the headquarters, which is a wonderful headquarters. It's gorgeous, beautiful. There's remaining funds there. Every single dollar of those funds needs to go back into the police department. It's earmarked for public safety. It needs to be in the police department.
Thank you. Okay, Lewis, this is kind of a long question.
I knew you were going to get you at it.
On the City of Lakeway website, you speak of the spirit of the new comprehensive plan and the inevitable expansion of Lakeway. So much development has already been approved and is being proposed. It is difficult to keep track of it all. It seems there is a constant push for more. Do you know how many housing units, including single-family homes, condos, and apartments, have already been approved in the immediate area, including Bee Cave and the county? And then, do you think the increase in housing units will impact the price of housing and potentially solve the labor shortage problem without adding workforce housing? Why or why not?
I was wrong.
I know, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, what did I say on the website? I mean, because I didn't say all of that. I mean, you had
You
to
talked about the new comprehensive plan and then the inevitable expansion of Lakeway. So my question is, how much has already happened? Do you think that what's already been approved will adjust the market in housing where workforce housing may not be necessary?
So I'm not saying that I think workforce housing in general is necessary. It is one tool that cities use to try to get workforce, to get people into their community. But there are, I can't give you an exact number because we're not even informed half the time about what's going on in other areas. But Bee Cave is building a lot. They're building a lot of activity centers. They're building a lot of residential. They're talking about building workforce housing homes. They're talking about lots of apartments. If you go a little farther out to Sweetwater, there are 850 apartments being built out there, but all indications, and in looking up the company that's doing that, they're going to be pretty much luxury apartments based on what they typically build. As far as Lakeway itself, Rough Hollow is completely spoken for. There's some areas around in the commercial area that are going to be built, but there probably won't be much in the way of apartments or high density. We've approved a few different projects along Flint Rock in that area. We have some very small projects going in North Lakeway, and there have really, anyway, Anyway, so I don't think that what's being built today and what may be being built tomorrow is necessarily going to solve the workforce problem. But I'm not 100% convinced that some of the solutions that we've been presented with will serve the workforce housing problem either. It's a big problem. It's not just ours. It's a huge problem all across the country. In an area growing like ours, it's kind of a conundrum. There's other options besides workforce housing.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Connie, on your website, you talk about smart development. What is one way the city is doing a good job, and what is one way the city is doing a bad job right now?
So when I talk about smart development, I think you've heard it phrased a few different ways here. But the phrases I usually use are a collaborative approach, a cooperative approach. And by that I mean we need to know what the ETJ is doing, what Bee Cave is doing, what Spicewood is doing. That's what affects our roads. That's what affects who's coming to our schools. That's what affects our entire community. That's what brings our small businesses in. That's what attracts them away. And so we need to know their statistics. We need to communicate with these folks, whether it's the folks who are in charge or whether it's having open houses and town halls. And I think that's something the city's doing a great job of. I think the city tries very hard to keep everything as open and transparent as possible. One way I've suggested to improve upon that is to allow attendance at the council meetings both by Zoom and in person, so that those of us with small children, activities to do at night, busy lives, can pop an earphone in, cut up the potatoes for dinner, and still stay apprised. But when I talk about smart development, I mean taking a detailed approach to what's going to be in every development and taking a 30,000 foot view of how does this development fit in the overall puzzle and the picture that is our community. One thing that I've learned since January, when I decided to jump in with both feet, is that Lakeway does have a very unique shape, right? And sometimes it's hard to know whether your neighbor is able to vote for you or not. And so Lakeway needs to look at this, communicate, cooperate, and collaborate with all of our neighbors. Everybody has an interest in making this the best community that it's going to be. Hardly anybody was born here and raised here. We all came here because we want the same things. And I just think if we work together, we can do that.
Thank you. Okay, Steve, same kind of lead up that Lewis got.
Okay.
On the City of Lakeway website, you state on the city site that you support the new comprehensive plan to guide inevitable growth and specifically business growth coming our way. At the February 2022 town hall with the city manager, she disclosed that property taxes paid by homeowners fund more than half of the city's budget. Do you think those numbers reflect an original intent for the city of Lakeway? And how do you balance the will of the people shouldering most of the bills with commercial developers? Or is there an intent to change that ratio?
Well, thank you for the question. The one part that's pretty easy to answer is that the original intent of Lakeway was a retirement, single-family dwelling community. Had very little to say about businesses. They kind of grew up in a haphazard way. It's interesting to compare where the money comes for operating the city in Lakeway versus Bee Cave. We're almost polar opposites. Most of ours comes from real estate, and there's a lot of it comes from sales tax. I personally don't think that we want to go out and offer huge subsidies to companies to move into the area, which would cost taxpayers money in a way. I really think that commercial needs to come on a free market basis. That if there's a need, they'll come. And I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question? I mean, Lakeway will grow. We've almost quadrupled in size since the city became a city in '95. And we're pretty close to build out. We're not gonna get much over 22,000. So we're within 10% of build out. But there's still plenty of room for good commercial development. And I think we saw during the COVID episode that we got the sales tax, maybe even we got some from BK because people got on their computer and where the product is delivered is where the tax gets credited. So we did pretty darn well on that sales tax, even though we don't have huge businesses.
All right, thank you, Steve. Okay, Kelly, on your website, you mentioned a workforce crisis. This is a narrative we hear all the time. Have you talked to local business owners to find out the source of the crisis? Is it the commute? Is it low wages? Are there other factors?
Sorry, I like to stand and talk because I have kids and I'm chasing after them as I talk. So yes, I have. And I actually have a couple of solutions that I'm currently working on. So I've been working with a few local business owners that I personally know to bring in potential privatized busing. With that privatized busing, it would bring in individuals from different parts of Austin, maybe in from Spicewood, in from our closest actual busing location, which is down in the Y, be able to bring them in. One of the number one reasons is it's a far location. They can get paid almost the same, closer to home, and especially right now with gas prices, nobody's willing. So that is really the main reason. So with the privatized busing, there's a short-term solution or a quick solution that we're currently working on is actually carpooling, rideshare. If a person works at HEB, employee A, excuse me, works Tuesday every day from 8 to 5, and so does somebody at Torchy's, and they live in the general vicinity, let's get them connected. Worker A and worker B will never know that they work together. The employers do. So we will have a database of information that an employer can go out, research, and try to marry up two different employees in the area so that they can carpool. Now, the privatized busing would actually pick people up. So I'm going to work, and I've been talking with local businesses on this, using a restaurant as an example. Maybe they're all the line cooks. They all come in at the same time to do prep for lunch. They come in at 8:30. They get dropped off. On the flip side, on the back end, they're picking up their night shift folks at the same locations. They come, they deliver them to the location and then they get picked back up, and then they are returned back to their original location. So those are two solutions I'm currently working on.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay. All right, Jennifer. What about you and your experiences make you different from the current council or the other candidates? And use this time to differentiate yourself and describe the direction you hope to steer the city.
Okay, so one of the things that I think makes me different, Lakeway is a changing community, as Steve pointed out. So I'm a mom raising 2 young children in Lakeway. I think that makes me different. Also, I have a public safety law enforcement background. I have thousands of hours, over 3,000 hours of training. I also, part of my time at the Attorney General's office, I worked public integrity investigations. And what that entails is investigating local elected officials across the state of Texas, mostly in South Texas, unfortunately. But I learned a lot in that process about local government and about integrity and what that looks like and what it doesn't look like. And I promised this community that I would serve with the utmost integrity out there. I know what that looks like. I have also attended a lot of supervisor and leadership courses to include the West Point Leadership Academy. I graduated from that, I believe, in 2016. And I've supervised a lot of officers in the Austin Police Department before leaving that department, and I'm a supervisor in my current role as a legislative, public affairs and communications. I'm a spokesperson, and I oversee all communications. I think those are all, things that I bring to the table. I bring the knowledge and skills to affect good government. I work with stakeholders across the state, 27,000 members we represent. And my job is to every year work with those 27,000 stakeholders, gather all of their needs and concerns, bring them to the state legislature, and enact good government, working with both sides of the aisle to keep Texas safe and to keep our law enforcement happy.
Thank you. So the same question for everyone. Steve, what makes you different? What do you add to the council? How are you different from the other members? And how will you use those skills to steer the city?
Okay, well, electing me will bring some experience, some perspective, and a voice of reason and continuity, as I'm the oldest and longest serving member of City Council. I think some details have been lost when we have rapid turnover on council. I'll continue to be detail oriented and prepared for the meetings. And I'll continue to be responsive to citizens' requests and use my listen, learn, lead as operating principles. In terms of the direction I hope to steer the city, I have my opinions, but the opinions of the voters are more important. I'm there to serve the voters, not to carry out my personal agenda. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, Kelly, same question. What makes you different? What are you bringing to the council that's different from the other members? And how are you going to use your own individual characteristics to steer the city?
Well, like you just heard, I just spoke, I'm an innovative person. That's what I get paid to do for a living. I'm a problem solver. I grew up in a farming family. We were not ever allowed to say a complaint unless we were willing to figure out a solution and resolve it. So I actually stepped in the race because I live on Flint Rock Road and have for 15 years. And those of you who live on Flint Rock or have been here for a while, you know our road has been turned upside down. So I actually started advocating and right out of the chutes when that became a problem. And so why I will be different is that although that is a main issue and something I do want to resolve, there's a lot of issues that the city is facing. I'm a problem solver. That's what I do. I'm both left brain, right brain. I'm analytical as well as I am creative. So thinking outside the box is a huge thing for me. And I have the know-how, the knowledge, the ability to go in and work with different committees and say, what are your issues? What are you facing with? And then I can take that back, analyze the data that I take in, and come up with very selective, innovative solutions to fix our problems. I don't know about you, but transportation's a big thing for me, and I've had enough of the accidents. I've had enough of the issues on Flint Rock Road. I don't know how many more deaths we have to have or major accidents before citizens say, okay, we need change and we need it now. So again, coming in with my background, it's a very unique skill set. If you guys go home, take a look at competitive intelligence. It takes a very unique mind to be able to do that, and I'm successful on it, very successful. And I know that that is the exact foundation to be able to be successful on council. And a lot of times my solutions that I refer back are not favorable. I have to tell somebody some really bad news. The good thing is that I do it calmly and effectively to get the best buy-in.
All right, Lewis. You're up, Lewis.
So I'm the shortest.
Uh-huh.
That's one thing that makes me different. But
You sit tall.
I'm actually standing up. Anyway, so on council, I think, at least from what I hear from my peers, is my biggest skill is digging into everything heavily in depth, trying to find all the little aspects of a issue coming to council, and make sure that not just what is in black and white. Yet vote yes, vote no. I dig deep into it. Maybe there's a third opportunity that nobody thought of. On council, all you have to do is show up to 3 meetings every 6 months. And you don't even have to vote, you can abstain. The real difference is how much work are you gonna put into it? I mean, I've proven over the last 3.5 years that I spend an enormous amount of time studying every single thing that comes to council. I educate the public on it. I didn't just say I was gonna do it, I did it. I had special meetings every few months. I'll have a video meeting or a group meeting, either talking to businesses or local residents. And those are the things that I actually do. Then I take action on that on council. I meet with groups on streets and things, where they have special issues, and I actually get that done. I reach out to businesses and TxDOT when there are problems and for planning. The thing you get with me is mostly that I work very hard. I definitely take the time to get involved in as much as I can. I do far more than is expected, and I have influence on the rest of council. The rest of council trusts me to give them good information when we vote. So I think that's what makes me different.
Thank you. All right, Nina.
Okay, well, I would bring to council a legal background. Basically, I think like a lawyer. I know that's real scary. But I can analyze complex documents and issues and kind of distill it down to what you need to know. That's what I do. Any potential liability for the city and therefore for its taxpayers, it pings my radar every time. Even better, my expertise in mediation and dispute resolution will assist in easing controversy and finding some common ground. We need a lot more common ground around here. My goal is always to make Lakeway even better. That means making our great city an even better place to live. I think that simple concept should be the measuring stick used for every decision and every vote. Is this going to make Lakeway a better place to live? Yes, no. As a council member, I would strive to amplify what works and fix what doesn't work and make Lakeway even better. On budget issues, I will look at every penny. I do that for my own money, and I will be doubly so that way on taxpayer funds. I'm open to innovation, especially when it comes to solving these big, stubborn problems that have been around since I moved here 12 years ago. It seems to me what we've been doing isn't working, so maybe we need to try something bigger and better. I'd be willing to do that. And finally, as council member, I would hold regular office hours so residents can come and talk to me face to face. Email, social media, they're great, but they don't work for everything and they don't work for everybody. So face-to-face contact, always good. And again, short, sweet. That's it.
All right, Connie.
So again, my name is Connie Ditto, and what I will bring to council is absolutely everything I can in a nutshell. I've told you guys a little bit about my background. I have had all kinds of different jobs. I have a very unique educational experience. I'm a quick learner. I love people. I graduated valedictorian of a very small high school in the middle of a cornfield in Indiana. I graduated from Purdue University at the top of my class. I thought I didn't want to be a nurse anymore, so I studied for a couple weeks by the pool and did an LSAT book, and then I went to law school, and during that time my husband got into med school, and I went to law school in Chicago, and he got into medical school in Tennessee. So I finished law school in Tennessee and graduated in 2008 during what was a little bit of a rough time in the economy, and I ended up, long story short, taking 3 different bars. I took and passed the Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas bar because we moved here 3 years later. I mentioned to y'all my father worked in the steel mill. I grew up, my grandparents lived in Detroit. My grandpa slept with a revolver under his pillow, had bars on his windows. I know what it's like for a community to change and for crime to come in and for it not to look like what it did when you were a kid. And I know we all moved here because Lakeway is nothing like that. And the big change that I'll bring is I am a critical thinker. I am a big thinker. I am flexible. I am kind, but I am tough. And people are always surprised about that about me. But I will dig down deep and see what really matters. And I think what matters to me is what matters to y'all. I mentioned I have small children. I want things to be great for them now. They are only going to be little once. They are only going to be teenagers once. But they are also only going to grow up every once, and I want them to come back. So I want it to be good forever.
Thank you. Okay. So a few people came in after I gave my introduction, so I just want to thank you for coming. Remind anybody new that there is another candidate forum in Rough Hollow on April 14th. And then LTP is doing a virtual forum on April 19th, if you missed that in the beginning. One thing that came up during the break was every election, it's structured a little bit differently in that, for instance, Lake Travis ISD, they run in a place, right? When you file as a candidate, you have to run in a place and you run against whoever's filed in that place, right? So in Lake Travis ISD, we have candidates running in place 3, 4, and 5 this election cycle, and they're running 2 in each of those places. On City of Lakeway, there's 3 open positions. There's 6 candidates running, and the 3 top vote getters will be seated. There's 2 incumbents running, the gentleman up here, and the 4 ladies are all new candidates. I hope that answered your question. Yes? Good. Awesome. Okay. Questions. Back to questions. Jennifer, specifically, what is your stance on having the Lakeway Police Force become unionized? And what efforts have you specifically done to engage the community that you believe, or let's leave that off. What is your stance on having the Lakeway Police Force become unionized?
Is that a question from somebody in here?
Yes.
Or- okay. Who is it from?
For you, it doesn't, nobody's on there.
Okay. Well, okay, so this is an education piece here that I'll have to do. The Lakewood, any police department across the state, which the large majority of them have what's called an association. That is the closest thing you can get to a union. I know a lot of people like to use that word because they don't like that word. But the closest thing you can be to that is what's called an association. We already have an association, the Lakeway Police Officers Association. I'm endorsed by them. So the only thing that I could do, and yes, I do want to do, is to encourage them as an association to grow their membership, meaning if there's officers who are not currently a member, sign them up to be a member of the association. And another thing I want to do is to ensure that they have a direct line of communication with the city council, because currently they do not. There's a difference between a chief working with the city council, which is necessary and great. There's a difference between that and having an association who represents the rank and file officers. Like I said, I mean, the large majority of police departments have associations. I was part of the Austin Police Association. I was on their PAC for a while as well. And it is the way that we, as part of their being on their association PAC, one of the things I would do is go meet with city council members. So we were all assigned to a city council member. We would go meet with them individually and express, our needs, our concerns, or even just educate them on little pieces that they didn't, maybe they didn't ask the chief that question, or they want to see if there's a different response from the rank and file than there was from the chief, and many times there are. It's not a bad thing. It's just 2 completely different perspectives. So I want to encourage the association to continue to grow their membership, directly communicate with the city council, and again, just community engagement and building up our rank and file officers through the chief as well, but again, building up their association.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
Do we know how many officers there are in Lakeway?
31.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sworn, yeah.
Okay, Kelly, earlier you talked about privatized busing as an option or a thought or idea. Have you considered, there's a concern that, for instance, in a retail establishment, if it's slow, people get off early. And sometimes their shifts are not always exact. Same thing with a restaurant where you have wait staff or cooks. The shifts aren't necessarily defined. It depends on the business that's happening that day. Have you thought about that issue, that concern? How would you address that with the privatized busing?
Yep. I could sit, I guess, for this one. So yes, that is something that we have. Actually, in fact, my little small town, I grew up in a town, I graduated with 86 people, so tiny, tiny town. We actually have privatized busing in my little town now, and it's up to, I think, 3,500 people maybe now. We actually have privatized busing. So the thought behind that is that number one, you have to be credentialed in order to get on the bus, because I know a lot of people are saying, well, how do you know who can get on the bus, who can't get on the bus? There's a lot of fear out here about just public transportation bringing people out here. So credentialing is number one. The other thing is that the buses, the entire business would be set up for not for profit. And so all those buses would be dedicated and they would be circling. So it's not just 3 drop-offs or 3 pickups. It's constantly going back and forth between the businesses. A restaurant starts different than a retail, right? Retail, sometimes they don't have to get there until 10:30. Well, a restaurant can't bring their staff in at 10:30 because the food's got to be ready for lunch by 11. So it would be constantly going back and forth. There might be a slight wait until somebody is getting picked up, but we're talking about multiple buses. We're not talking about one.
And I just want to
Oh,
ask,
go ahead. Yeah.
who would pay for that? Because that's got to be expensive. You said nonprofit.
It's not for profit. So there is the ability to do limited fundraising that would go into it. They can also receive some grants. We're seeking legal counsel right now, so we will have more information on that. But it would be not for profit. It's not a free. So there would be actual paid. You would actually have to pay to get on the bus. It's not a free.
Oh,
Yes,
Okay.
it's not free.
got it.
So again, if you guys go out into the community, it's not public transportation. It is credentialed. You have to work for HEB. We would have to know where you're going and why you're going. I mean, in a nice way.
Okay, Nina, lots of discussion recently about the Lakeway Air Park. Simply put, are you supportive of the air park to maintain an independent operation run by a not-for-profit entity or versus a city-controlled operated? Do you have an opinion about the air park?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Everybody has an opinion on the airport. I've had 3 houses in Lakeway, and I get progressively closer to the airport. So, my opinion is I want the air park to continue. It's a very valuable amenity to the community. It's got to be as safe as possible because we all live here. Houses are here. We drive on Lakeway Boulevard, which unfortunately had a horrible fatal crash a couple of years ago. That was very close to my home, by the way. But that anybody could have been driving down that road. There's a school right there. I've talked to pilots. They are very interested in having the air park operate as safely as possible. So it's not just the residents, it's everybody. Safety has to be the priority. That air park is embedded in our community. So it's to everybody's benefit to make sure it operates and it operates as safely as possible. So I took a tour, like all the candidates probably did, of the air park and got some good information. So some of the questions I had raised some other questions in my mind. So I think the council's upcoming appointment of a committee of community volunteers, including, I believe, some pilots, will be very helpful in at least getting communications open and resolving what I think really were some honest miscommunications on some of the points. It seems to me like the after hours landings, that can be fixed. Even probably the fuel sales issue can be fixed. The tricky ones are going to be commercial flights, what that is and what's allowed, what's not, and the flying lessons. Those are the 2 issues that I think are going to be very tricky, but the committee can do some valuable work getting, at least laying the ground rules, coming up with some potential solutions. And then it will go to ZAPCO, and then it will go to council, because that's what our zoning, this is basically a zoning issue, an ordinance issue. That's what our charter requires, and that's the due process that will be followed. But I think the committee is a good first step.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't get whether you were for them managing it themselves, or if you thought the city needed to be doing the management.
If they can do it safely, then they can do it themselves. If they can't, if their attitude is, well, we can't do anything, I mean, I saw some of that, and I was a little bit upset by that. I think if they're not gonna take responsibility, the city doesn't have a choice. I mean, the city leaders, council, and the mayor, they can't just throw up their hands and say, oh, we can't do anything. The buck stops with the city. So somebody has to take charge to make sure it's as safe as possible. I hope it can be their part. That would be optimal, obviously. If they can't, then it's gonna have to be the city.
Okay, Connie. This person, I've become increasingly aware of drug use in our schools. This is a problem that impacts all of us with increased crime and an education that will inevitably suffer. What are we as a community doing to fight this growing problem? So on city council, is there anything that you can think of that a way that the city can be involved in this proposed increased drug problem in our city amongst, I guess, youth and everyone?
So I'm not aware, and you'll have to pardon my ignorance, if there is some sort of DARE type of a program for, drug awareness sponsored by the city council. If there is something like that, I'm not aware of it. But what I think can be done, because idle hands are the devil's work, so to speak, I think we need to create a lot more opportunities for our young people. We need to create opportunities for them to volunteer with this city. They stay very busy with school. Lake Travis is a very good school district. It's very challenging. And they also have to provide 25 hours of community service. And I'd really like to see more opportunities for our young folks to get involved, to intern with council, more parks and recreation for them to do, more sidewalks, bike trails, those types of things. The swim center to grow. I want the Y to be here. There's lots of things that I think the city can do to involve our young people and our families. I was at the park on Friday. There was a movie, there was popcorn, there was all kinds of things. And I understand teenagers don't want to hang out with their families all the time, but there's lots of things we can do. I would like to see about getting some water activities at Lakeway City Park, some kayaks, some canoes. If we need to bring a vendor in to do that, let's do that. This is Lakeway, and there's not a public access to the lake. My family and I keep a boat on Rapala Marina. We're very lucky to do that. And we love it. It's one of our favorite things to do. Kept me sane during COVID. So I was able to go out there. So I think that's one way. Obviously, the schools work hard to create opportunities for drug education and prevention. And I know vaping didn't even exist when I was a kid. But there's lots of educational opportunities as well. And I think we can capitalize on that with our Facebook and our Instagram, and maybe the city gets a TikTok against drugs. I don't know.
Thank you. Okay, Lewis, I gotta find my question. Recently, a code violation came up in the news about a business being operated out of a home in Lakeway. The Lakeway Code section lists 19 criteria for a special use permit. This newsworthy business violates many of the criteria on the list. The permit was rejected by ZAPCO and the Board of Adjustments. Do you agree with this decision? Why or why not? And what parts of the Lakeway Code would you change if you wanted to change it?
So I agree with the ZAPCO decision because they have to follow the ordinances. They can make a special use permit in certain cases, but something like that hadn't been done before. And I feel like ZAPCO, when you're on ZAPCO, it's not like council. Your job is to measure everything against the ordinances. So when they said no, they were measuring it against the ordinances. So I completely understand why they did that. Now, I don't know how popular this answer will be, but if we follow that, my understanding was that, and I guess, how much of this can I talk about?
Not much.
Because there is
Okay.
a lawsuit against the city, but I will say this. Based on those same 19 rules, there are a whole lot of people, even on my street, that are breaking the ordinance, okay? The second piece of that that's very important to me is if the Brady Bunch moved in, they wouldn't create any more different situation than that house is right now. If you look at many houses on our streets, there are people coming in and out of the driveway all day long. Either people that work there, service their home, do their yards, all that, and visiting. There's all kinds of that going on. If a person, if a lady wants to teach piano lessons, and she is going to have, say, 3 different cars pull into her driveway in the afternoons after school, yeah, I don't think that's a problem. And I think we should change our ordinances to suit logical use like that. But as it stands today, anyone that gets a FedEx is at their house for business, breaking the ordinance. That needs to be fixed.
Okay, good. As a follow-up to that, Steve, Lewis mentions that up and down his street, people are violating ordinances all up and down the street.
That ordinance, I think is what he said, but go ahead.
So my question is, are we in the business of following the law or the ordinances? And if not, then what do you have to say about that? And where is the line?
Well, it's an interesting question. I'm glad you brought it up. One of the main thrusts of really the last 3 years is looking at city ordinances and trying to get away from thou shalt that's not really enforced to making enforceable, legal, easily understood ordinances. And a lot of progress has been made on that because frankly, we had things that the law had changed and we hadn't changed our ordinances, like entering somebody's property to do an inspection, that type of thing. We've taken care of those. I think that we swung the pendulum away from really tight control on things like speeding and other things. And we wanted to become more code compliance rather than code enforcement, so that instead of it initially showing up and saying, hey, you're doing something wrong, here's a fine, to, we'd like you to, are you aware of it? You need to fix this and come into compliance with it. I think we might have gone a little too far on that. I think we need to tighten it up a little more. We need to educate people because a lot of people move here, they're doing what they did wherever they came from, and they're not familiar with the city ordinances. We need to get back to that. And I'm a proponent of, if it's there, you should follow it. If you don't like it, you should change it. And, it's pretty simple.
If what's there, you should follow it, and if you don't like it, change
Well, if there's an ordinance
it. Okay.
and there's a rule, the city should enforce the rule. Or we should change the rule so that it is enforceable, or it serves the will of the people.
Yep. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, Nina. Fatal traffic accidents are prevalent on Highway 71, especially near the proposed workforce intersection. The road is very curvy, allows high rates of speed, and is unusually slippery. Does this concern you? And what precautionary measures do you suggest?
Well, I've talked to a lot of people about that. A lot of people have talked to me about that. I've been told that that part of 71 has been a death trap for decades. I've been told it's haunted, that particular corner. I've been told it is haunted, and that is the cause of some of these accidents. 2 people told me that.
That's so crazy.
That's a no.
That's a new one for me.
There's whatever goes on that track. So we're talking about 71 and Bee Creek Road. Is going to be additional traffic, and whatever goes on that road, the developer or City of Lakeway will do whatever TxDOT tells them to do. And that's all we can do. I mean, we can't say, okay, well, I think I'm gonna go out there in the middle of the night and add a couple speed bumps. I mean, all you can do is what TxDOT tells you needs to be done at that intersection. I personally think the speed limit needs to be reduced. You know, other people disagree. They like to really let it out there. I don't know. I think when I'm on that road, speed seems to be the main problem, not traffic. To the extent you have traffic, you don't have speed. It's not necessarily a good thing, but I mean, to the extent people are speeding, that means there's not all that much traffic there. It's kind of crazy, but if that project goes in there, it will be the safest in and out. There'll be a traffic study done. It will be less additional trips than, say, if a Chick-fil-A goes in there. A Chick-fil-A, according to the developer anyway, would be an additional 5,000 trips a day. This project is about 2,500 trips a day. So, you know, something's going to go there. It's not going to stay like it is. It's not a question of, well, we're going to put this development in there or nothing at all. That's not the way it is. Something is going to go there. When people decide they're going to sell the land, they're going to develop it, they're going to do it. So it's just a question of what goes in there, whether it's commercial, whether it's housing, whether it's a combination of the two. So yes, of course, it needs to be as safe as possible. Traffic is always, you know, an issue. But I don't think that just because 71 is a dangerous road means we're not going to put anything on that corner. It's not going to happen.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer. Many homeowners expressed road safety and congestion concerns, especially on Serene Hills at the last town hall. I've expressed concerns about the pedestrian safety in front of Rough Hollow Elementary. There is continued rapid approved development at both locations on Bee Creek and Serene Hills. The many jurisdictions enjoy the luxury of pointing fingers at the other ones, like that's not our road, that's a county road. Is this smart growth to not consider road connections and safety and allow rapid development? And is there a smarter way to anticipate these concerns and potentially ask developers to make adaptations to their plans? Or do you have any thoughts about all of that?
So the two, and I've spoken to a lot of people on Serene Hills. We have a very similar problem, in my opinion, and the opinion of the people living on Highlands. It's a very similar situation mainly because of the slope. So at Highlands and the Welcome Center, we have the flashing light, which is effective because it's a flat, long road prior to hitting that light, so you can see what's going on. I drive it every day. When you get up the hill, and there's another one, it's very similar to the one on Serene Hills, where you don't see it. I mean, I don't know what it is, but you don't see it in enough time, and it's very dangerous. People speed there, both of those roads, constantly. I've heard that from the Serene Hills community. I've seen it firsthand and heard it from the people on Highlands. So a couple of things that I think are immediate fixes for that. And another reason it's a huge problem is because until we expand 620, which is a whole nother question, these are cut-through roads. So people are flying through these roads. Two things I think we can do immediately are put stop signs. We need more. Stop signs are universal. Everyone sees them and they stop. It's not, these flashing lights are dangerous. Someone's going to get hit. And it takes a while for people to cross over as well. So, you know, we have kids crossing on Serene, riding their bikes from that one section to the other section. It's extremely dangerous. The Rough Hollow Road, I haven't really heard too much about. My children go to school there. I know I could see where it would be a problem. That hasn't been expressed to me, and I haven't seen it firsthand. But the speed limit there that's the other solution. The stop signs immediately and the speed reduced from 35 to 30 in all of those locations. I believe on the Rough Hollow, it's actually higher than that. But it's 35 on those two main roads that we're discussing, and it needs to be 30.
Okay. I think everybody in this room, Lewis, this one's for you. I think everybody in this room knows that I feel like there's a police officer on Lakeway Boulevard every day, all day. Like, everybody knows you don't speed on that road. So is that potentially something that we can do on Serene Hills and Highlands, or assuming those are in the city of Lakeway? Has that ever been discussed?
It has, and we do it. So whenever we get enough complaints from a local group or somebody that lives in a particular area and we're starting to see a lot of that kind of a problem, we will ask the police to go and do it. And it was a process that the police uses to continue to like do extra patrols in those areas, and they'll focus on that. They'll look at the difference between citations before and after and all that, and then we can decide on what kind of calming measures we employ after that. The problem with the guy who's always parked in that spot is that almost nobody forgets that, and they'll just behave because they know he's gonna. I can see it when I'm going down Loman's Crossing. I know that just past the school on the right, there's a police officer there. No, I never. Not me. But there's a lot of people who do, and they know to slow down right there. We used to, and I'm glad we don't do it anymore, we used to just put some of the older vehicles, we just leave them there empty. And people would drive by and see that. I don't think that works. I think once people see that.
See, I would make the argument that it does work. And you just said that it does work. We all slow down because
Well,
we
no,
know.
it works. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just, the empty cars, I don't think work very well.
Word gets around.
Once.
Yeah,
They
people
work
notice
once.
it. Huh?
They work once.
Yeah, they work
Yeah,
one
exactly,
time. But
exactly.
as far as when you know the spots, then you know to slow down. So you're right, it does work. And, I do think they should move it around a little bit more than they do. But I'm not a police officer, so I think they have better advice.
Thank you. But you guys are on council, and I also travel Rough Hollow or Highlands every day almost. Serene Hills, we have people in the crowd every day. And I'm just, this is not a question, but I would say it does work, and maybe it should be discussed because I think it would slow down traffic and improve safety. I do. Anyway, so that's neither here nor there. Okay, Kelly. For those of us who have lived here for more than 10 years, the impact of development on our water sources, especially Lake Travis, are visible. Are you concerned about our natural resources? And if so, how do you balance growth and preservation?
Yeah, so some of you actually in this audience know this about me, is that I'm huge into environmental things too. Water, I'm very concerned about our water. We have more and more development that's going farther out west that is going to suck the water and take the water before it even hits Lake Travis. Lake Travis once had a lot more commercial property on it. There were more restaurants and things of that nature. So I am concerned about it. Development, now we have to take a look at that because Texas is the strongest state in the US for property rights. A property owner has the right to develop their land. And so we have to work with them and allow that development. Now, we just don't have to hand them the normal keys to say, do whatever you want, but within reason. That's why I know council is starting to do a lot more PUDs because they have more control over what's being developed versus what's not being developed. Because as Gretchen says and other people, you can build whatever you want. As long as you don't have an HOA, I could build like the mini Mickey Mouse castle for a house, and Lakeway can't do a single thing about it. Well, within reason, but I mean, you could have an obnoxious looking house. So back to the waterways, I am concerned about that. I would really like to see that we start securing more water rights, and that so we can secure and make sure that we have water. The other thing is we need to work with LCRA because all the development that's going to go west is going to start taking that water before it ever hits our lake. And as low as it is now, wait until that new golf course community is built over by Angel Bay. It's going to drop considerably. You're a boater. I know there's other people who are boaters here who like to go out on the lake, and it's drastically going to affect that. So I think the city needs to work with LCRA a little bit more and Travis County to secure that.
All right, thank you. Okay, Connie, the city of Lakeway contracts with Travis County for health inspections of its local businesses. This gave the county leverage or power over mask mandates and the closing of businesses over the past 2 years. Do you think this forfeits local control? Why or why not? And would you be in favor of the city performing its own health inspections? And if so, would you have voted to keep businesses open and optional masking?
So, I think COVID was absolutely unprecedented. Nobody knew what to expect. Nobody knew what to anticipate. And when it first started, I mean, nobody had any idea it was even coming. And so, it was a public health crisis. And so I think that a lot of the things that happened, we now know in hindsight, 2 years later, maybe weren't the best choice. I don't think that shutdowns are going to happen again. I don't think that mask mandates, that people have asked me about vaccine mandates, I don't see any of that in our future. Being a former nurse, married to a surgeon, my sisters are nurses, it's a public health issue. And it's becoming, I think we see COVID especially, a little bit more like the flu, where we're going to have to get various vaccines, and different strains affect different populations differently. The first round of COVID affected the elderly. Delta affected everybody. Omicron, if you see some of the stats, affected a lot of children. And so I think that if we do get to a drastic point where people's lives are in danger, hospitals are overflowing, we don't have enough healthcare providers, we're having to call in the National Guard and build up extra morgues or whatever, we need to consider very carefully what measures are actually going to prevent that from happening. But I think looking back, the shutdowns like they occurred are not likely to happen again.
Okay. Would you, just to follow up, because would you be in favor of the city doing its own health inspections and not contracting with the county?
I'm not aware that the city has the manpower to do that, and I think we'd have to raise the funds to do that, which means increase taxes, well, if we don't increase taxes one place, then we'd have to take it away from somewhere else. There's a pie, right? So if the citizens thought it was important enough that they wanted to take from one to give to another and have their own their own health inspector, then that's certainly something council should consider, or if they wanted to raise money to do that. But again, I don't know that that's necessary or that's feasible in the instant time.
Okay. Okay, Nina. Many people are questioning the integrity of our elections nationwide, if not worldwide. Currently, the city of Lakeway contracts with Travis County to run its local elections. Would you be in favor of the city running its own elections? Why or why not?
Well, I'm not aware of any problems we've had with the Travis County doing it. So unless it's broken, I don't see any point in fixing it. I think Lakeway has an awful lot on its plate right now as far as what the city does manage and is doing very well with. I don't see adding that unless there's a specific reason to do so. So I'm not aware that would be needed or a good idea at this point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any questions? Yes.
I have a question, and maybe everyone can answer it. My question is, on 620, everybody knows the traffic, and I know that the city council is not tech stop. I know that. I know that at the time when I did leadership like Travis, that was where the money was reallocated. We were going to be able to widen the road. Since then, that money was reallocated to South I-35. So then we put the little bunkers in. Now we have lots and lots of accidents because people keep doing U-turns on this road. Is it within city council, or how does that work with TxDOT? Because I know before when Mayor Cox worked with them, to be able to either put no U-turn signs in or drop the speed limit. What is your solution to making a temporary fix to 620 better until we are able to widen or do something with TxDOT? And so just in order from Nina down, if you would.
Do you have any short-term solutions for this 620 safety and congestion?
Before the expansion, which we don't
Yes.
quite know what that's going to be or when it's going to happen.
Right.
And yet we're paying $3 million for our share of the right-of-way buyout. Yeah, the short-term fix we have right now are those fun little concrete things, which I'm told, even though drivers hate them, we can't turn around, we can't make left turns where we want to, they have stopped the T-bones. So that's a good thing. I tend to avoid left-hand turns anyway, I'm just that kind of person, but yeah, sometimes it's very frustrating. But that's an example of a short-term solution that may or may not have worked. So I don't know that we want to jump in there. What I want is to actually get a timetable from TxDOT as to when they're actually going to do this expansion and what it's going to entail. We need to know what that schedule is so that we come up with our workarounds. If we get Main Street finished, both missing segments of it, we get Lowman Spur connected, we get all the stuff that we have to do so we can navigate within Lakeway without being on 620. Trying to fix 620 at this point, I can't think of anything that I would really put forward. And I haven't read anything that makes sense to me at this point. Sorry.
Connie?
Sure, I am not a transportation lawyer. But I have represented a lot of trucking companies, and I've actually responded to rapid response, and I've seen the instant effects of death. And anything we can do to make it safer, I think we need to do. The legal confines of what can the city do versus what TxDOT can do, whether or not we have the legal authority to put up a sign, I don't know that. That's something that I would research myself and consult with our city attorney on, and also, consult with TxDOT on. And if there's anything we can do, we certainly need to do it, especially if it's, some signage and, just takes some consultation and also with some experts about, will this really work? For example, lots of folks think, if, just as an example, if you were to reduce the speed limit, sometimes, as a paradoxical effect, that actually increases accidents, right? Because then you have more fender benders or whatever. So I would use experts along with what we can do. And if our hands are tied legally and we can't do anything, then we just need to be a squeaky wheel and do what we can to get TxDOT to move and to help us keep our residents safe and everybody that passes through there. I'm sorry, that's not a very good answer.
Kelly?
Actually didn't get to do our number one question. Transportation road safety is my number one thing I want to tackle. My life has been turned upside down the past 15 years living off of Flint Rock Road. Once Serene Hills, there's another Serene Hills person here. Once that road was cut in, our traffic has went up thousands of times, like literally thousands, are the amount of traffic. I'm a problem solver, and again, like I said, I wasn't allowed to complain about something unless I'm willing to create a solution and do something about it. That was just my upbringing. So I started advocating at city council meetings for road safety. This is before I actually decided to run for city council. I wanted to take it a step further and say, you know what, I will be the solution for this city. So I've been advocating now back to 620. One of my neighbors was actually on the committee that worked with TxDOT, or I should say Travis County. It was actually 3 counties that were involved with that. That was the short-term solution. It has fixed some accidents. Now it's creating other accidents, right? That was always meant to be a short-term solution until it widened. TxDOT held at least their end of the bargain for short-term solutions, and that's why you see the work up on 2222 and 620. But it left us hanging. And me personally, if I get on council, I want to be the person that starts fighting, because I have 9 years before my daughter starts to drive, and I need to make these roads safe. So I feel comfortable handing her a set of keys and allowing her to drive. And I wouldn't, if I have a 15-year-old right now, I wouldn't want my 16-year-old to start driving. And that's really scary for a community. When is enough is enough? So if I get on council, I hope to run a few more times. So I'd have 6 years, and after that, I'd be more than willing to still work with the city and be that person and that voice that fights for Lakeway, because enough is enough.
Plus?
Okay, so a little bit of history. Originally, those were supposed to be temporary when they widened 620. Those barriers are horrible because they're split. They look like Pez candies, just kind of laid out, just real big concrete ones. And they are confusing to a lot of people. But our police tell us that there's a statistically significant difference in the amount of incidents on 620 because of those. So there's a lot of near misses, and the U-turns are a nightmare. Most cars cannot make a U-turn without going over the shoulder. So that's a problem. They are not gonna, I mean, we could probably lobby to have them remove them, but then the logic behind the fact that we have less accidents now would be a hard one to make them swallow. So the other thing to consider too is what you said, the idea of making no U-turns. I do think that we can get that done. I've met with TxDOT many times. I'm on a first name basis with a couple of those people. One of the things that, I've been after them and they finally agreed to put it in the budget to make the left turn coming out of Main Street onto 620 from there. So they've committed to that in their budget. They also did extra lighting. When a few citizens came to me and asked, I went to TxDOT and they made lighting around the Randalls exit at Lomans. They added lighting. They will do some things. They won't do everything. But I do think we could probably get, at least in certain sections, the no U-turn. But the reality of life is that this widening of 620, your kid's going to be driving probably before it gets widened. So I would like to look at a better solution for the little Pez concrete slabs, but a quick solution could very well be to block some U-turns there, and I think that's a good idea. We can do that.
Oh, and I apologize for my phone ringing. It was off, so how it rang, I have no. It's an act of God, maybe.
It might be
I saw
No, my
Steve
phone
turn
was
it on.
No, I was going to say it was an act
Steve
of God.
called
We're in a
you.
church. It's the ringer is literally off. I don't know how it did. Sorry, I
Jennifer.
apologize.
I agree with Lewis. We definitely can do something reference signs. I know that from working in the city of Austin, they have quite a few city ordinances reference traffic violations that are not on in state law. So we definitely can address that issue, and I think we should, because I hope that it's not true that the 620 expansion is going to take as long as what Lewis is suggesting. That's another thing we have to work. I think we need to be working with, and sorry if this is already ongoing, but working in conjunction with the county on this side and with BCAVE on this side to really prepare and have a vigorous fight to get this thing approved as soon as possible. I understand that next, we're done for this year. Next year we have to be on them, collaborative effort to get the expansion done as soon as possible. Prior to that, though, I really think, because again, I drive this every day, and I know most of you do as well. If we don't get the Stratus situation figured out, this just makes the whole thing drag out forever. It makes it way worse. One of the big problems with the what do you call it? There you go,
The
Pez.
Pez, yeah.
One of the big problems with the Pez is that nobody can get anywhere without cutting through parking lots. And we can't put that on Lakeway PD to start citing everyone in this room. That's unfair to the department. It's unfair to us. We can't get anywhere without cutting through. We have to get Main Street built immediately. We have to address this proposal that Stratus, I don't know why we're dragging our feet. Stratus has proposed something. The research I've done is that we haven't done anything yet about that proposal, but it's been out there. We had the open house. The proposal's there. I'm happy to. I would love to know what's happened since the open house behind closed doors in City Council. But that has to be done. We need Main Street. I think that will help as a temporary solution, along with passing some city ordinances to ease that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Can't find my black hat, but I'll talk without it anyway. There were many public meetings in Lakeway, in Bee Cave, before any of that traffic meatloafs, I call them instead of Pez, but whatever, before they went in. And they were in line with what the future expansion plans were, at least in terms of the center median. So the idea was put them in, let people get used to that before doing the expansion. I do think it's helped a lot on left turns, but there is a problem with U-turns. But the problem is, if you can't make a U-turn, you may have to drive a mile to get to a street light to make a U-turn there. And that'll congest that even more. So I think there's a lot extra traffic that we've been getting because of all the development on 71. And that's not gonna go away. And that development happened because they widened 71. And when they widen 620, it's not gonna be less traffic. The more accessibility, the more flow there is, the more development's gonna take place. So that's my black hat view, but in terms of fixing the existing problem, maybe we can put in Jersey barriers so they're high enough that people know, hey, even in my pickup, I can't drive across that. Maybe that would help. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. That's probably for all the candidates. So I heard real quick that there was a question about elections and if the elections should be done by the city. And I think that's not addressed well enough because there are so many other subjects that the city takes care of, is in charge of, but not elections. And I volunteered recently with a few of my close friends in a recent election as working the election poll stations, and something is completely off. We had several systems break within a period of 2 hours. A lot of people do not trust that system. I had folks that showed up to vote that decided that they didn't trust the system because they were breaking, and they left. And some of them did not vote. And why have Travis County take care of our elections when we have the full capability of conducting our own local election? It's probably the most important issue out there because if you don't have a fair election, and if the residents here don't feel that the election is pure, then it's almost like none of it really matters. That's probably the most important subject, and I'd love an answer from every one of you. That'd be great.
You want to start with Steve?
My understanding is that we contract Travis County to administer the elections. It costs us about $40,000. For us to buy enough voting machines and pay enough people to work as officials, I don't think it's economically beneficial. And I feel pretty confident that our elections are fair in this area. I'm not going to speak about anything else, and I think that's a waste of time to argue about election fixing. Let's educate people like these people want to do and get educated people to the polls, and I think it'll take care of itself. But respectfully, I disagree with having our own, but I'm willing to listen more.
I don't think everybody has to speak to that, but if anybody wants to speak to that, please raise your hand and we'll just go. Yes, Lewis.
So, the truth is, I have never, other than one person, one time asked me that, and I have never been asked that. I've never had anyone as a Lakeway resident come and say to me, I don't think the elections for Lakeway City Council are fair. I think that they're doctored or something's going on. Now, if it's happening, I agree 100%. If there's even a clue that it's happening to our local elections, I would also agree 100%. But right now, the community, now you're the second person to mention it to me. I'm all for what the community wants to do. If the community wants to do that, then I would be supportive of at least exploring it, right? It would have to be a little bit more than what Steve said. We'd have to really dig into what the cost would be. And then we would depreciate those assets over time. You wouldn't want to compare one $40,000 election to the cost of getting all the machines. You'd depreciate that over time. But if that's something that enough people say, Lewis, I want you to look into that, I will look into that.
Yes, Jenny.
I agree with Lewis that I would also entertain that idea. However, I will say another couple of my years at the Attorney General's office was spent working election fraud cases. And again, mostly sent me down to South Texas. there's a lot of corruption there, as we all know. But I will say that the majority of those cases, whether it didn't matter who was running the election, the fraud was consistent in terms of what type of fraud was taking place. I don't know that the county versus the city would make a difference. Just based on my experience and what I've seen. I kind of feel like the county is a little less biased, that potentially there would be less fraud, because if we get the city involved, then they're obviously going to have a vested interest in who wins the election. Again, this is just based on my experience working actual election fraud cases and seeing them through all the way through prosecution. It does occur, and it's very frustrating. And everybody in this room deserves to have, their vote count and a corrupt-free election. But again, I'm open to hearing more about how we would even entertain that process, because that's something that I don't have experience in. That answers that.
You want to speak, Kelly?
I was asked this quite a bit last year, whether or not we should move our elections. And I think from a municipal standpoint, and maybe our school board, it is relatively easy to do a hand count on that from a paper perspective. I think we could definitely utilize that $40,000 into a strategic plan. And strategic. I'm a innovative thinker and creating and problem solver, so I always go down that route. But going back to the actual question, I was asked it a lot. You guys may not have as much because you sat on council, but I'd be potentially for it. Not for a huge election, because that would just be too much. But a lot of people propose and ask, can we do a hands count and have it actually multiple players? This is nonpartisan, right? But if you have different political groups that are involved to making sure that nobody has overstake in the game and has control one party versus the other versus the next group and the next. If we all come together and actually do a paper count where we're all together and being fair and balanced, I don't think anyone would probably argue with that, right? We all want our votes to matter. I know I do, I know Lewis does. I don't want my vote taken away from me, just as he wouldn't want his taken away. I haven't heard that much opposition against actual hand count paper. I could be wrong. I was asked that a lot last year. So I would be for it if we have it fair and have it well coordinated and well managed, because that's the key.
Connie, you're the only one that hasn't spoken on this if you want
right?
to.
So, like the others, I'm unaware of any allegations of fraud or issues with our local elections. And so I know there's lots of issues outside of that. But I agree with what Steve said. If this is something we need to look into, let's do it. But based on what I know now, I just don't have enough knowledge about that. And I think that if the public was to be brought with the idea of having a hand count, I think it would cause a lot of controversy and divisiveness, and I think we all need to think very, very carefully before we go down such a road to change such a big thing.
Anybody else? Yes.
Okay. I'd like to hear from everyone, because I think this is kind of a yes or no type question. But if the aviation committee, to be approved by the city council, determines that there will be no recommended changes to the zoning language, will you honor their recommendation?
We'll start at this end and go that way. Y'all are on the end, so you're either going first or last every time.
I'm not sure that our city charter would allow, the city charter is not going to allow a voluntary committee to decide something like that. It's a zoning issue. So the committee would make a recommendation, and it would go to ZAPCO, and ZAPCO would decide what to do. And then ZAPCO would make its recommendation to council, and then council would decide. It's our city charter, which is basically the constitution for the city of Lakeway, that determines how this is handled, not a committee. Committees are great to get information as a starting point, but it wouldn't be the deciding vehicle here for a zoning issue.
So that's a no.
Well, the way you phrase
It's
the
a maybe.
question, yes, it's a no.
It depends.
Okay,
You
only,
set up a committee
Yeah.
to make recommendations and
Correct.
work something out.
To make a recommendation to
And if there-
ZAPCO.
if the
ZAPCO has the
recommendation
right to
is
say,
make no
yeah,
changes,
that would be its recommendation to ZAPCO. ZAPCO is not required to accept that recommendation. But certainly give it
but if it
consideration.
was brought to you from ZAPCO, I'll modify my question. If ZAPCO honored that, are you gonna honor ZAPCO? Their recommendation,
You're gonna
for
put,
no changes, it's real
you've gotta
simple.
put two layers
you tried to
of
deflect.
hypothesis in there. If it met the requirements of our zoning regulation, then yes, but if not, I think you need to look at what the zoning regulation requires, but if the committee says, okay, we wanna do this, and ZAPCO says we wanna do this, then yes, you would give that great weight, but it's still council's bottom line, it's still council's decision on what it wants to do, what it thinks is best to do.
And that's why-
Otherwise,
that's why
council
I'm
wouldn't
asking you.
exist, I mean,
I
if,
agree with that.
yeah.
But the question is, are you gonna honor that?
am I
So
gonna
you're-
honor?
What I'm hearing is
ZAPCO's
you're gonna make an
recommendation.
independent decision.
I think
independent
council
of
always
ZAPCO and
gives
of the
ZAPCO
committee.
great weight, but council does not just rubber stamp ZAPCO. That's not the way it works, no.
Okay, I understand.
Connie?
So Nina's done a great job of explaining how the process works and, you know, that there's always some variables. But yes, probably my understanding is that the committee has aviation experts on it, that it's a fair and balanced committee, that these are people who know what they're doing and that's why the committee exists. So, yes, I would. I mean, I think we need more committees. I think we need a transportation committee, a workforce housing committee. I mean, I think that's why we create these types of things. So, I mean, not having it in front of me, but yeah, probably.
There actually was a transportation committee.
I know they need to
previously.
redo it.
And so the answer is I would listen to the committee, take in their recommendations. It would go through ZAPCO. I don't have to recite all of that. Those are the experts, right? I'm not an aviation expert. I've never flown on I should say I have flown on a plane. Let me correct that. But I've never flown a plane. I don't know the intricate details of it. But I would definitely honor the recommendations and do a deep dive, and most likely I would vote yes. If it flows through the proper channels, then the answer would be yes.
So you can't always say 100% yes,
Yes.
because,
In case something crazy.
I mean, thank you for answering for me. But seriously, if, and this is, I have almost never said the opposite of what ZAPCO wants. But if suddenly the committee recommended Zeppelin landing spot, and, you know, I mean, it could happen. I mean, it won't happen. But you have to leave that little bit of space there to say no. We've had recommendation. Every committee, except for Board of Adjustment, Board of Ethics, and ZAPCO, are recommendation committees. I mean, including ZAPCO. The first two aren't. ZAPCO can make certain decisions by themselves, other things for zoning, they have to make recommendations to city council. So I almost always vote with them, as long as there wasn't something crazy that I knew that they missed or lost, I would probably vote with ZAPCO on that.
Let me make it clear. If the committee determines there will be no recommended changes, it's a hypothetical. If there's no recommended changes,
And ZAPCO agrees
Yes.
by a majority, then probably I can't see why I would vote any different from that. That makes sense to me.
Yes, 100%. I mean, I support the air park. I have been engaged from day one on this issue. I've taken the tour that everyone here has taken. I have good friends all around that air park. I have used that air park. I've taken off from that air park multiple times and landed there multiple times. I have taken my children there. I've seen tons of children enjoy the air park during COVID. I don't see any reason why the airport can't resume operations the way they have been. I'm supportive of the committee, absolutely. If there's a concern, that's how we should have approached it originally. And I think that's why we are, in this place where we are, where this is so divisive. It should have been a committee from day one. Again, I'm engaged in the issue. I support them 100%, and I think the airport should operate as is. And if the recommendations are there's no changes, then I would 100% vote for that and with that.
Thank you.
How much time do I have?
2 minutes.
7 minutes.
2 minutes? I'll make it short, yes.
I didn't have a question. Good job. All right, anybody else?
I want to ask about the housing unit that was started up there, affordable housing. It seems it's just stopped.
That's Hudson Bend.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
the city of,
Oh, that's outside
That's
city
Travis
limits.
County.
I
That's
understood
Travis
it was
County, yeah.
supposed to be helping out the city of Lakeway by affordable housing for, first responders, et cetera, et cetera. So we have no influence over that? Who has the influence over that?
Travis County.
Very good.
I would ask, does it concern you that the same developer that's developing that is the same developer that's proposing Bee Creek and 71? Does it concern you at all that that development really hasn't started? And in July of 2021, they asserted they had 15 to 20 teachers on their wait list, and it was supposed to be finished now.
Yeah.
Does it concern you?
It doesn't concern me who built it. It concerns me a lot on who subsidizes it and what the rules are for people using it. And I'm kind of a free market guy on this, that I don't want the city of Lakeway involved in picking winners and losers on who gets cheaper housing. I think that's a very bad path to go down. I think the people are working in our community, and they've chosen where to live. And I think many of them are families that want a little more space to run around. Maybe they want a lake to go to that's close to them, that they have other relatives. And I don't think necessarily they're just sitting up at night praying that somebody will put in a 850-foot square apartment that they can rent for $1,500 a month. I think the free market has to take care of it. We may have to pay more for the services that we need, but I don't want Lakeway to get involved in being a housing provider and picking winners and losers. I just don't think that's in the general interest of the population.
Amen. That's good. Thank you. Real quick.
I was gonna
yeah.
say, I'll add to that because Conines did propose the Nightingale, and I sat through ZAPCO and all of the city council meetings on that one. And so it's essentially almost the same that's being proposed on Bee Creek and 71. It concerns me a little bit that it looks like a stalled project because I've been watching that one. I drive up that direction to go to Costco, and so I've been seeing it sit there. I know that my daughter's teacher drives from a distance. So if it was true workforce and it's truly slated for teachers, first responders, and our police, then, and they've already been agreed to it, then it should be built and not just let it sit. We've all seen just stalled developments. I mean, look what's happening right next to Flint Rock, right by the hospital. That development's been ongoing for 4 years, and it's just sitting there. They literally swing a hammer like the minimal times per day in order to be compliant with the city, because the city said enough is enough, you need to start building it. So back to that, I think we need to hold them a little bit more accountable, at least if they were to, I'm just saying, if it was to be approved, they would not be able to sit on a project like they are up on 620. If I was on council, I would ride them. We learned from past developments that they sat for too long, especially at Flint Rock. I mean, and we can't do it anymore. We have to be done with the leeway, and you have to give what you promised.
I think that's a question that might be a dumb question. Why would a developer stall their own project when they're losing money? Does anybody know why those projects have stalled?
I know one of them.
What?
Well, I'm just, from my understanding with the Flint Rock project, it was sold during development, and that then COVID hit, and people weren't going into offices, and it's an office building.
Ah, got it.
So that is part of the reason why it stalled, and I'm thankful that the city said enough is enough and started pushing them. Now they swing a hammer that about the most minimal they have to per day in order to at least look like they're making progress.
So in a contract, couldn't that be written in, no sales during the build? The project needs to be finished by this deadline, or you're in breach. I mean, aren't there workaround ways to
Well,
deal
the
with
city,
that?
so let me
Let's
answer.
let Connie, can you answer that question?
Sure. So I've also done some construction law and contracts, right? So owners don't promise a certain time frame. They have a contract with a general contractor. A lot of times there is a time of the essence clause. So say you have 500 days to build, and then you start paying liquidated damages on day 501, right? But there's lots of issues back and forth with that, because then the construction company is production driven, and where you come in for the quality, and you have to bring in, I did oil and gas third-party inspection cases, because they literally pay third-party inspectors to watch the pipelines being built, because the owners and the construction company have competing, driving forces. So it's very complicated, and there's so many different reasons why projects can stall. That not being in Lakeway, who knows if it's a permitting issue, a utilities issue? We just don't know. And so I think that while everybody wants to put these deadlines in, the reality is, especially with COVID and everything, and that was even this litigation will be going on for years. Was COVID a force majeure? Like, did that give them an out? Nobody even knows. So I think we definitely need to do what we can, but we need to be very realistic in our expectations on all sides.
I'm not running for a seat, but I do work for a builder. I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night. No, I'm kidding. I work for a large residential builder, and we have situations where we're going through the entire permit process. We're building on these people's land. We build on your land, and because of supplies and labor, it's 6-8 months out before we can even start their project, because we can't get materials.
Right.
We can't get materials. So I think that, I can't speak for the Flint Rock, but possibly the one up here in Hudson Bend.
Yeah.
Right.
So
It's
so many
it's
different
really
factors.
bad.
Well, one of the things that the city did do well recently is they put in a timeline, that if you get approval for a PUD or some sort of build, you have to build it by a certain time period. And if you do not meet that, you have to come back for pre-approval, another approval. It's just not an open end. You can get a plan today and build 20 years from now, because the city will be different in 20 years.
Right.
And so that's one good thing that the city council actually did recently. One
Tony,
good thing,
do you have a
Lois, just
question?
one.
Okay, so as Americans, we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And we live in a constitutional republic here where we have certain inalienable rights. Yet, we saw our own governor and county officials and municipal officials lock us down. At least one panel member here seemed to suggest that that was justified because of what we didn't know at the time. I'm thinking, if you're gonna lock down Americans and curtail our rights, you better be basing it on something that's known. I want to hear from everyone on this panel, did you support that lockdown in the past? Will you support it in the future?
Yes, Steve.
No.
Jennifer?
Do we just get a one word?
Well,
How much time do we get?
Explanation is fine.
We got 18 minutes.
Okay,
But you don't have 18 minutes.
I actually had prepared a statement about my belief on local government. The answer is no. But I truly believe in local control, okay? I've been vocal in the Capitol when state government has attempted to invade constitutional boundaries of cities and counties. local government has the right to control ordinances and city departments, and I philosophically believe that the best form of government plays out at the local level. That's one of the reasons I'm running. I'm excited to be a part of it. This is where good government, this is where the best form of government lies, is local control. And so the answer is no, but I wanted to mention that as well, yes.
I want to follow up with that because, so what you're suggesting is that, okay, the governor doesn't have the authority to do that at the local level. And if you're have any say-so at the local level.
Mm-hmm. My answer would be no at the local level.
Okay.
I don't know what the rest
Okay.
of the council would say, but my personal vote would be no.
Okay. Thank you.
Louis?
So we were getting governor's orders like crazy, and we were supposed to follow the governor's orders and all this and that. It proved to be a bad idea. I think that everybody's rights should be, if I'm an owner of a business or if I'm an individual, my rights, you don't have to come to my restaurant, and I don't need you, and you don't have to come to my house. I don't have to meet with you, whatever it is. But I do not, I should have just said no, but I'll just say no now, so no.
No.
You sort of answered
I was
before.
say, I think you already know my answer, and I think it's a public health issue, and I think it's very complicated, and like I said, I don't think it's gonna happen again. So I don't,
So it's okay to lock down free Americans?
I don't-
Based on an unknown because some people are afraid that something might happen.
I don't
That's
see
okay?
it that way, sir. My husband was going into the hospital every day wearing a bunny suit, trying to save people's lives. My sisters worked on COVID
And that's your
units.
justification
Like-
for locking me down. That's your justification for
I'm
taking
saying-
my rights away.
I'm not getting into an argument with you here, sir. I'm saying this was a public health issue that you're trying to turn into a constitutional one. I think those are two separate things. I think we have very different beliefs on this issue.
Okay, okay, Nina, thank you, Connie.
It's not gonna happen again. I'm not gonna, defend what Governor Abbott did. It was a shit show. It's not gonna happen again.
Okay,
We hope. I work for pharma companies and literally I get told it's going to happen again. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, in my sector, we're told multiple times a month that this will happen again. I'm in the
Well,
health
the
sector.
hospital
we're asking.
CEOs,
That's
nobody's
why we're
sending out those information. None of the healthcare providers are saying that, just
So we know there's a
FYI.
lot
does anybody have any other new questions? No? Okay, thank you very much, all of you. Real quickly, do we have that slide? I don't know. So early voting starts April 25th and goes through May 3rd. Election day is May 7th. I have been told by the mayor that he's going to have dates put on signs for the community to remind us to vote. I hope that is true. I think that is true. Please encourage people to vote. It's very important. Don't complain if you're not a voter. And if you want to volunteer to work the elections, right now the county is receiving calls for volunteers to work the elections. Our voting locations, according to the mayor, are going to be at the Lakeway Activity Center, Bee Creek City Hall, Lake Travis Educational Development Center, which is where the board meetings are on 620, and Lake Travis Transportation Center, which is on 71 between like Serene Hills and Hamilton Pool Road. So we'll have 4 voting locations. Anything out of district that you know of?
Yeah,
There's
for early voting.
a list of 29 other ones out of district that are throughout Travis that you, if you're going downtown.
Okay, so a lot of people are going to ask that question. Can I vote anywhere in the county for Lakeway City Council? The answer is yes.
On election day.
On anywhere that
On
you,
election day.
No, you can vote anywhere at any time.
anywhere at
Early
any
voters.
time.
Okay.
Didn't know that.
Anywhere at any time. But the 4 closest locations here are the ones I just mentioned. I actually am opposed to being able to vote anywhere at any time. I would rather everybody have to vote in 4 locations, but Nobody asked me. Anyway, thank you for coming. Yes,
The
go ahead.
candidates will not have to take their signs down between the end of early voting and election day this year.
Okay,
Because
yeah.
the city council is going to consider an ordinance change at the upcoming meeting.
Good. Okay, so if you see all of the election signs, they'll all
Good
be
job,
up all the way through. If you don't know runoffs, so that it's a separate election, it's gonna be at the end of May for House District 19, Attorney General race, and Land Commissioner race, and Railroad Commissioner race. So it's very confusing. Your friends will, and all of us will be very confused. They're two separate elections. Election day is May 7th with early voting before that. And then the runoff election day is May 26th or 7th?
I want to say 27.
27th, May 27th, with the week before that being early voting. Yes.
Could that happen with the city council as well, if they were within like a percentage point or something?
No.
Is it-
May
is that-
28th, it's done by a plurality of the votes. If there is a tie, there is a runoff after a recount.
So only if there's a tie is there a runoff for
Correct.
local
So
elections.
two candidates will have more votes than whoever's tied at 3, and then there'll be a runoff between position 3.
So people have won by, I think it was 6 votes before. 3 votes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a
So-
city
so your
council
votes
race is a
matter.
tight race. Everybody should be voting.